Everyone to joining us for the February edition of our monthly webinar series at Dragon Trail Interactive. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sienna and I'm the communications manager for the company. So today we're going to be talking all about WeChat, China's #1 mobile app and social media platform. Much of the content for today's webinar actually comes from Dragon Trail's WeChat rankings for travel brands. And we've been compiling these weekly for over 2 years now, tracking national tourism boards, DMOs, which are regional and municipal tourism boards, airlines, and cruise lines. And in April of last year, we added 2 new categories with museums and attractions and hotels. So today we'll be using that data to first look at reading rates on WeChat for travel brands in 2018 compared to 2017. And then we'll move on to the results of our full year WeChat rankings report for 2018. So this will include information on the top accounts as well as the top articles and the leading themes. And this will complement our report, which was published last month. That report you can read in full at the link below. You may have already read it, and so we'll be changing the content slightly so that it's not too repetitive from the report, and we'll kind of add to the report rather than just repeat the information in it. I should note that we will be sending out a PDF of this presentation to everyone who attends the webinar, so you will have all of these links and everything with you in a couple of days, so you don't need to write them all down now. And we'll also be sending out a recording of the webinar in case you want to review it or share it with anyone who wasn't able to come today. We will finish up our webinar by looking at some of the biggest changes to WeChat as a platform in 2018 and the start of 2019, and how these changes specifically relate to travel marketing. And finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A if you have questions at the end. You can actually ask questions at any point during the webinar. I won't be able to answer them while I'm doing the webinar, but they'll be logged if you use the Q&A button, which you should see on the panel on Zoom. And it would be very helpful if you could please use the Q&A button as opposed to asking questions through the chat, because questions with the Q&A button, they're very easy for us to see and make sure that we get those answered at the end, whereas questions in the chat tend to get lost and we have to scroll up and down to find them. So just use the Q&A button, please, so that we can more easily answer your questions. So as I mentioned before, my name is Sienna and I'm Dragon Trail's communications manager. I write most of the blog content that you'll find on our website, including all of our quarterly and annual WeChat rankings reports that we've ever done. So it's an area that I am quite familiar with, and I'll leave the rest of my bio here if you want to read it in review. For those of you who don't know Dragon Trail already, I know many of you will have attended our webinars in the past, but for those who might be new, we are a digital marketing and solutions agency, and we're focused entirely on Chinese outbound tourism. We're headquartered in Beijing and also have offices in Shanghai and Xi'an, as well as international offices in the UK, where I'm based, as well as the US. We have around 80 clients on 6 continents, and our clients span many different kinds of travel brands, from national and regional tourism boards to hotels, airlines, cruise lines, attractions, and other kinds of businesses in the travel sphere. Dragon Trail Interactive is actually celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, and in honor of that, we're holding an inaugural 2.5-day summit in Beijing this May called China, the Future of Travel. This event will feature speakers from some of China's leading travel companies, as well as outbound travel experts and some Chinese international travelers themselves. So it's a really great opportunity to hone your understanding of the current market and the newest trends. It will be going on immediately following ITB Shanghai, and we can even arrange transport up to Beijing from that. So it might be a good add-on to your trip if you're already planning to visit ITB. The event is being supported by a number of leading international tourism associations, which you can see below, and you can learn more about the event and apply to attend at chinafutureoftravel.com or on the events section of our website. So now let's start in with our webinar content by taking a look at what is going on with WeChat reading rates. So the data that I have on the screen here is looking at all WeChat official accounts, not just travel. And admittedly, it is from 2017. But basically, it doesn't paint a particularly rosy picture for user engagement with content on WeChat, with nearly 40% of accounts in 2017 reporting a decline in reading rates. So the reasons for some of this decline or stagnation in reading rates for content produced by official accounts on WeChat include oversaturation with just too many official accounts all competing for attention in the same space, while the novelty of official accounts on WeChat may have worn off. At the same time, there are new platforms for content, including very popular news reading apps such as Today's Headline, as well as new up-and-coming social media platforms. However, even with this on the screen, I would say that there are definitely some reasons for optimism for those of us here today in the webinar. One of these reasons is that WeChat has recently launched a new content sharing function that we'll look at in detail towards the end of this presentation when we look at some of the changes in WeChat. And perhaps even more importantly, 2018's results for travel brands show that travel-related content on the whole seems to be doing quite well still on WeChat when we compare reading rates for the 2 years. So here we've got some tables comparing results for travel brand reading rates in 2018 compared to 2017. So we first looked at that at this topic this summer, when we compared the first half of 2017 with the first half of 2018. And at that time, we did have some reasons for concern. As you can see, we saw some big drops, especially for national tourism boards, as well as for cruise lines. But when we look at a larger range of data, looking at the full year, the picture is actually a pretty positive one. And we can see towards the end of the year that cruises really recovered and actually had higher average reading rates per article than in 2017. And this was basically the same for all of the categories. DMOs also were quite stable to getting bigger, especially when you look at the top 20 DMOs, so a wider range of data than just the top 10. So that's relatively stable, and airlines also are steadily increasing, and the increase is quite similar whether you look at the top 10 or the top 15 airline brands. So the only area that still has a noticeable decline is national tourism boards. And here also it's important to see that there's a much bigger drop in average views per article if you just look at the top 10 NTOs compared to the top 20. And it's because the decline is very much influenced by a few top accounts that have had very big decreases in average article reading rates. And this in turn throws off the average for the rest of the accounts. So we really haven't seen those big drops of around up to 50% in some cases for most NTOs. And in fact, some of the leading ones have shown increased article views in 2018. So it doesn't mean that all of the NTOs are decreasing. So even with the fact that some of the leading NTOs have seen huge drops in their average article views in 2018 compared to 2017, I don't think that this is necessarily reason to panic for quite a few reasons. And I think it's important to stress that a decreased reading rate on WeChat for a national tourism board's content does not necessarily mean Chinese tourism is also decreasing or decreasing at that same rate. And there are actually a number of factors that can affect these reading rates. And it also doesn't mean that your account's content is suddenly 50% worse than it was last year. I don't think it works like that. So first of all, and I think most importantly, some of the countries that have had the biggest drops in National Tourism Board article reading rates are really big countries. These include the US, Canada, and Australia. And these are also countries that have particularly strong regional tourism boards on WeChat. And when you look at the top 20 list of DMOs, it's really dominated by the US, Canada, and Australia. And so while Destination Canada's account may be down, at the same time in 2018, Tourism Vancouver, they raised their average article views by 75%. So that's great news. So it seems like things for these really big countries might just be shifting to a more regional level with people looking for information. So another example might be the US, for instance. So a Chinese traveler knows that they are planning to travel to California. And so instead of following the Brand USA account, which will have information about the whole country, they'll directly go to the Los Angeles account or the Visit California account to get specific information on the destination that they're going to. And actually, when you look at it, the US, Australia, and Canada all had the biggest numbers of Chinese arrivals ever in 2018, as well as Australia and Canada both had very healthy increases in Chinese tourism numbers as well. So I also think that in addition to the regional accounts, Chinese travelers may also be looking on other travel platforms for information for their trips too, and research. So I would say that this decline in reading rates for some of the top NTOs, it doesn't mean that you should give up on WeChat. It's still very important to have a presence there. But ideally, if you are kind of a big enough organization or company, it's a good idea to be taking a multi-platform digital approach. So starting to look at Chinese travel websites like Mafangwo and Chongyou, as well as other kinds of Chinese social media platforms too, to make sure that you're really covered across many areas and then reaching maybe a larger number or different kinds of tourists as well. So there are also a few additional reasons that might explain big increases in reading rates. And I think cruise lines are one of the areas here. And one of these is advertising. I will say outright, it's not possible for us to track every sponsored article, and we don't manage all of the accounts on WeChat, so we don't really know exactly who's advertising. However, sometimes we do see ads pop up on our own WeChat timeline, so then we know. And also in the lead up to the October holiday especially, we saw some really huge readership numbers for articles by accounts that generally don't rank at the top. So this includes a few articles by Visit Korea, for instance, which generally is not in the top 3 or even the top 10 NTOs, and suddenly had these articles with huge readership rates right before the holiday. So this might indicate that they perhaps paid to have those articles sponsored, and thus reach a larger range of people that way. And then there are also travel trends, which you may not be able to control yourself. So Viking Cruises has been a huge success story from 2018, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later too. And while we have noticed their ads on our timelines on WeChat, they've also put out really excellent content. Their articles are beautiful and engaging and interesting, informative. And they also happen to be selling European river cruises, which are rising in popularity. So there are a number of different factors that can go into the increase in attention for that brand, for instance. So now we'll move on to looking at the top rated accounts for 2018 and their content. So you can find extensive rankings tables and lots of numbers and a lot more information in our report, which I won't include here. I'd like to go for something a little bit more simple. And also, as many of you may have already read the report and seen the tables, I've tried to supplement this information with some new kinds of things in the following slides. So looking first at national tourism boards, apart from Thailand, all of the top 5 national tourism board accounts were from countries that had their highest ever numbers of Chinese arrivals in 2018. these are also the same top 5 accounts that we saw in 2017. They're just in a different order than they were last year. New Zealand, this year, in 2018 as well as 2017, had the highest average views per article, and both Japan and New Zealand saw very healthy increases in their average post views, increases of around 12% for each of those. Japan really led the way they got the top article on, or they ranked the top of the WeChat travel rankings for overall post views for that week, almost every week of 2018. And they had a really excellent content strategy, basically. Japan is a very popular destination, which means that people might be following it because they're already planning a trip there. But at the same time, the kinds of articles that they put out were really interesting and engaging too. They had lots of posts on nature, with especially successful posts on different kinds of flowers, such as this one on cherry blossoms. And they also posted a lot about food, which we'll see has been one of the big trends of 2018. And they also posted a lot of area guides. So unlike a huge country like Canada or the US, Japan is small enough that instead of relying on regional tourism boards to really give detailed information about traveling to places such as Hokkaido, for instance, the National Tourism Board can take that on and produce these smaller guides to certain regions of Japan, and those prove to be very popular. So again, we can see maybe a shift towards people who already have an idea about the destination and know specifically where they want to travel and are starting to look more for regional information than general national information. Moving on to DMOs, so this is municipal and regional tourism boards. Dubai stole the top position from Hong Kong this past year and announced that they saw a 12% increase in Chinese tourists in 2018. So Dubai is doing really well. They published a lot of lists and practical guides to things like food and shopping and other activities in Dubai. They also published quite a lot of content that had to do with celebrities, such as this one here, which is obviously kind of a paid promotion that they did with an actor named Deng Chao, who went around Dubai and took pictures of himself doing many different activities there. Another thing about Dubai is that they also covered quite a lot of family-related content, and so their shopping mall content might appeal more to younger female travelers, whereas they had a lot of lists of things to do with kids in Dubai. So I think they tried to cover a lot of different kinds of markets that might be coming to or through Dubai, and that worked out very well for them. So looking at the other top 4 accounts for DMOs, the top 4 list really has not changed that much since 2017. I mean, Hong Kong has dropped by 1 place, but they're still doing very well on WeChat for their content. So what really stands out here is Tourism Vancouver, which rose 15 places in 2018 compared to 2017. In 2017, they were ranked 20th when we look at the overall WeChat rankings for the year, and they're number 5 for 2018. So it's worth taking a detailed look at what they did content-wise in 2018 that could have given them such a big boost. So their posts hit on most of the popular content themes for the year. This included nature, looking at nature around Vancouver in all different seasons of the year. They had restaurant recommendations as well as information on local food products such as berries or salmon. And they also did several KOL partnerships throughout the year. Another interesting thing that Vancouver did, and I haven't seen from a lot of other tourism brands, is they took a wellness angle in many of their posts. And there were frequent articles on sports, from yoga, doing yoga in the Vancouver city center, and running, to hiking and skiing in the larger Vancouver area. So it's interesting to see if this gets picked up as a trend, perhaps in 2019, as Chinese outbound tourists are thinking more about health and wellness and physical activity in the places that they visit. The airline rankings are the most stable of any category, and we can see that the growth has been quite steady for their readership as well. Although I will say that when we look at the top 15 list of airlines, Asian carriers are even more dominant in 2018 than they were in 2017. And I think this is down to the fact that a lot of people are traveling regionally more frequently and looking often at low-cost carriers that have lots of links between Asian destinations and third and fourth tier cities. These kinds of airlines are used at a greater frequency than, let's say, a big international airline like KLM, for instance, that you might take once a year to go on a long haul trip. And so that's kind of why we see more engagement with the Asian airlines. The airline content is very much still promotions related in 2018 as it was in 2017, but there were a number of accounts with popular articles about food in 2018. This included posts from Thai Airways and All Nippon Airways about their in-flight meals, and Air Asia had a real durian theme going on this summer where they posted, I think, at least 3 articles that were themed around the stinky fruit, which is very popular in China. For cruise lines, I've already mentioned about the rise of Viking cruises, which just had a fantastic year, and some of the reasons for that. However, Royal Caribbean still holds on to first place very easily. They have far more average post views, overall post views for their most successful article of the week. They're really far ahead of the competition in all of those ways. And they were one of the first cruise lines to enter the Chinese market. And so they were able to establish themselves very early on WeChat as well. Cruises, like airlines, do post a lot about deals and promotions. That is generally what they post. But a lot of their content also emphasizes traveling with family. And I think that's a very important angle for cruises. So this could be traveling with your elderly parents or traveling with kids, you know, top tips for taking your first cruise with your kids, or intergenerational family travel. So the article that I have screenshots here is Royal Caribbean's top post of the year, and so the top post by any cruise line for the year. And it was a deal, it was a buy two get two free, but then that's obviously targeting families. And in the images you can see parents doing activities with young children, as well as a big intergenerational family dinner. For our next 2 categories, museums and attractions and hotels, we can't compare the results of anything since we just started tracking them in April, so we don't have 2017 data to compare them to. But we can look at the top accounts and articles for 2018. So for museums and attractions, Hong Kong theme parks were really far ahead of any of the kinds of museums around the world, which shouldn't be so surprising. They're very close to China and they do have more mass market appeal. So Hong Kong Disneyland especially led the way here. And their top post of 2018 was a sales promotion for the Double 11 sales holiday. This is meant to be Singles Day, but their post was very much geared towards family travel with a buy one, get one free offer, and not geared towards singles visiting Disneyland in Hong Kong. However, Hong Kong theme parks aside, the accounts that we saw do really well in this area include several Parisian cultural attractions, the Louvre as well as Versailles, the National Gallery of Victoria in Australia, as well as later in the year, the British Museum had content that was very successful, and we've seen at the beginning of 2019 that they've started the year very strong as well. When it comes to hotels, the content is actually pretty dry. The most read post from international hotel brands on WeChat, you can see, is that very small box at the top that's just, there's no pictures or anything. It's just a short announcement that the Marriott and Starwood Group would not be selling St. Regis. And that got over 90,000 views. And most of the other content from some of these top really big hotel brands, first of all, it tends to be domestically focused rather than outbound tourism. They don't write so much about their international properties, so that makes it different than some of the other kinds of accounts. They also tend to be quite repetitive, kind of having similar posts a couple of times, and they use their WeChat content to promote their membership programs quite a lot. That's a big strategy there. And then that can relate to outbound tourism too, because if you're a member and you're getting points domestically, then you might want to stick with that hotel group internationally. So it is relevant. But I would say for smaller hotels or smaller hotel groups that can't necessarily compete with these really giant hotel groups, it might be better to think of WeChat as a service tool, both in terms of things like booking or concierge services, rather than thinking of it as a content marketing tool, because it's not, we're not seeing that is it's particularly strong area on WeChat. I think it's more useful when you think about things like mini programs and bookings or chat with clients, for instance. So now let's look at the top themes for popular travel-related WeChat content in 2018. If you attended our webinar this last July on the first half of the year on WeChat rankings, you'll find that the themes have not really changed in the second half of the year. And indeed, they're not so different than they were in 2017 either. So the only major change from 2017 to 2018 has been an explosion of content on food. So dining is an incredibly important part of travel. It's something that we're seeing Chinese travelers put aside more of their budgets for and become a huge motivating factor for traveling abroad. Food is also very social media friendly. And I think what's interesting, and I chose these examples to illustrate, is that some of the top articles about food were on very basic and accessible food. So not anything too upscale and not fine dining. So we've got an article here on the best places for milk tea in Hong Kong. Or a very popular article was about convenience store snacks in Japan. So this is something where you can be anywhere in Japan to get those snacks. You don't have to make a booking. You don't have to have a huge budget. So it's the kind of food that has kind of mass appeal. And this can be supplemented by recommendations for fine dining, because that is something that Chinese travelers would be interested in as well. But having really accessible food related posts seems to be a strategy that's working, at least for these Asian brands. So nature was by far the most popular content theme in 2017, and it's done very well in 2018 as well. So destinations with beautiful nature should really plan to play this up in their content marketing for the Chinese audience. And what I think is great also is that it doesn't seem to matter what season it is, as long as there's beautiful nature. So we see popular posts that show snowy landscapes, that show autumn foliage. Of course, flowers has been a huge theme for spring and summer that we're starting to see come back again, with a very successful post by Japan just last week on their cherry blossom forecast for the year. So make sure you play up beautiful nature if you have it. And then celebrities, this has been very big again in 2018, especially for DMOs. So places like Dubai, Hong Kong, I haven't talked about it too much, but the South Australian WeChat account has also done very well in 2018. They used a lot of KOLs as well as celebrities. Vancouver and some of the other successful DMOs as well. K-pop band EXO seemed to be the top celebrity on WeChat travel-related content this year. EXO is a Korean band, but they do have one Chinese member, so that's perhaps the reason why the EXO visit to Dubai post got about the same number of views as the following week when Chinese President Xi Jinping went to Dubai. So, and they lit up the Burj Khalifa Tower as the Chinese flag. So it gives you some idea of the kind of popularity there. However, not everything was about EXO, and if you don't have a K-pop band coming to visit your destination, there are other ways to kind of leverage celebrities and KOLs. So Norway's king and queen, they went to go visit China in the autumn, and during their trip, it was announced that there would be this new flight finally connecting China directly to Norway. And that was very successful content as well. So it's really an issue of thinking of kind of what kinds of famous or recognizable people you might be able to leverage from your destination, and also consider working with Chinese KOLs too. So that is all I'll say about the WeChat rankings. As I mentioned before in our report, we've got lots of tables and numbers and more discussion about the accounts that have shown the biggest increases for 2018 and the reasons for that. So you can find all of that online if you haven't looked at the report already. So now let's look at some of the changes to WeChat itself over the past year. First off, one of the biggest changes that could especially affect overseas travel brands is that the number of official accounts registered under a single business license in 2018, it dropped from 20 to 5, then to 2. So this effectively means that you cannot get a Chinese agency to register an account on your behalf using their business license anymore. But at the same time, WeChat changed the rules so that overseas brands can open accounts that are actually visible to Chinese users, which wasn't necessarily the case before. So as of yet, and I don't know if this will change at all, you can only register for a service account, not a subscription account. So having a service account, it does limit you to posting 4 times a month as opposed to each day as you can from a subscription account. However, you will have more functions using a service account, such as booking and e-commerce options, and your articles will be shown more visibly directly as it looks like a chat in the WeChat kind of home screen, as opposed to having to go into the subscriptions folder to find the content. But we will have a look at the subscriptions folder in a few slides too. So the process for opening an account on WeChat now, if you don't have one already, it is an official account, that is. It's lengthy and it's very strict. They're very strict with how you write your name and how things are capitalized, and very small mistakes can get your account thrown out. But while I mentioned before that an agency cannot use their own business license to register an account for you, that doesn't mean that a Chinese agency like Dragon Trail still can't help you to go through the process and use your business license to apply on your behalf. So you can still get assistance in this area if you need it. We have got lots of instructions as well as FAQs on our website at the link below for applying for an official account yourself as well. And I do know of at least one person who attends our webinars who followed the instructions and managed to set up his own official account without help from anyone else. So it is possible. So also in 2018, as I just mentioned before about subscription accounts, WeChat changed the layout of its subscriptions folder. And before, when you clicked on subscriptions in your chat screen, which you can see on the left here, it would take you to a list of all the accounts that you followed, and then you would have to click on that account to see what content they had produced. But now you see recent stories laid out more like a news feed. And I think this really helps content to stand out and is more engaging for users. So it is a positive thing for travel brands that have subscription accounts on WeChat already. So here are a few more screenshots from my subscriptions folder. And I think what this drives home is the fact that articles with nice big cover images, they really stand out. An example of this, I would say, especially is on the left at the top. It's a post by Visit Edinburgh, and you see the girl walking in front of the row of colored doors. That really just jumps out on the screen for me. So some recommendations for content marketing in 2019 for brands that have subscription accounts is to really think about creating these cover images that will help your content to stand out in subscriptions newsfeed. An even newer change to WeChat that happened at the end of last year was the change of the like button to the wow or the how can button. So in the past, there was a like button at the bottom of each article on WeChat, and it was basically meaningless. It logged the number of likes, and then nothing happened with that. So they changed it to be a button that is called wow on the English interface for WeChat, and how kan, which means good looking, on the Chinese interface on WeChat. And if you click on this now, it shares the article with your contacts. If you go into the top stories folder on your WeChat account, you'll see the first tab is wow, and those are articles that your friends have clicked wow on, and so you can see what kind of content is popular with your friends. And this should really help content to be more visible and might actually influence reading rates to increase. I think WeChat is thinking about ways to do that, to make WeChat still an attractive platform for people to be doing content marketing on. And what's interesting is that looking on the left here on a post from Los Angeles's account, they have added a little animated GIF of an arrow going down that says click here. And so it's actively encouraging people to click the wow button and then share that and share it with their friends. And then finally, another change to WeChat that happened just this January, so in 2019 already, is how mini programs are displayed. So on the left is the traditional way that you see your mini programs, and you can still get to that. It still exists on WeChat, where you go to the mini programs folder. However, if you go to your main chat screen on WeChat and you just swipe down, you should see this new interface, which is the gray one on the right. And some people are saying that, are interpreting this as Tencent, WeChat's parent company, trying to become a full operating system of its own, where WeChat mini programs essentially replace apps. And in the meantime, though, Tencent is also working on improving mini program search, which is one of users' biggest complaints about mini programs. And I would say from my own experience, it can be very hard to search for mini programs, even if you know the name of the mini program and you get it slightly wrong. So it'll be a big aid to the development of mini programs if they get that search function to be a little bit better. Lastly, we'll look at some of the ways that travel brands have been using mini programs in 2018. Mini programs were launched in 2017 and they've been adopted by many cities. We've covered that before. And also this year, we took a look at how hotels have been using mini programs. So at the beginning of 2018, they were adopted by a lot of hotels. But there are also lots of other uses. And these include Visit Sweden's B2B training program, which is a mini program that Dragon Trail developed for Visit Sweden. Athens International Airport launched their own mini program around the end of last year. And this has a lot of information about things like baggage restrictions and duty-free shopping, as well as some basic information on Athens, getting into Athens. It's a very helpful and useful WeChat mini program that they're trying to use to encourage Chinese tourism to Greece and help Chinese tourists once they arrive in Greece. And then WeChat mini programs are also being used very effectively by attractions. So this includes one example here of Legoland Japan that has an interactive map of the park on WeChat in their mini program. One more thing to add about WeChat mini programs is that there was a recent study that we translated, part of that is on our website from last week. And this study was a big survey in China of mini program users. And they found that out of 6,000 WeChat users, 17% said that they use travel related mini programs. But interestingly, this went up to 19% for the group of users who were aged 50 or over. So although mini programs are kind of a new type of technology, they may actually turn out to be a good way to reach older travelers, which are a quite stable and growing demographic too. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how it goes. Before we move on to the Q&A section of the webinar, I'd like to let you know about our March webinar, which is coming up on Wednesday, March the 20th. This one will be run by our director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, Roy Graff, and it will focus on trade shows. So the date of the webinar is right before some of the biggest trade shows in China, COTTM in April in Beijing, as well as ITB China in Shanghai in May. And so it's a good kind of crash course in trade shows and exhibitions in China. We'll be running through the calendar for trade shows and exhibitions relating to travel in China, including which ones are best for reaching certain markets or for certain kinds of brands, and sharing lots of tips for how to prepare for a trade show, what to expect when you get there, and how to follow up afterwards to make sure that attending really helps you to widen your network and increase your business. And we'll also be covering some basic Chinese business etiquette too. So that webinar is already up on our website, and you can see the link below. So if you want to register for that now, it's already available. Again, we'll be doing 2 sessions for different schedules and time zones as well. And now we're ready to move on to Q&A.